here we go. Maybe the very first Carry On at Your Convenience fan commentary in the world. For everybody trying to sync up, there's the J. Arthur Rank logo. The guy banging the gong. We'll be straight into it. What's really funny about this film, though, is it's one of those films that anybody who's come into contact me with in any situation, whether it be online, in real life, like just watching TV, I'm sure I will have mentioned Carry On at Your Convenience. And what's especially funny is the fact that even though I love this film, and I can honestly say it's in one of my top 10 favourite films of all time, which nobody believes me when I say, I've got to admit, I don't particularly like this music very much. It's just a bit too sort of, well, it's too much. No, I can't really explain it, that kind of. And even though I've gone football matches and, it's really cool to chant or, going like a darts game or something and really getting into something passionately. But it's got this sort of, and it's not even the fact that it's a little bit silly, because I love kind of silly stuff, comedy things. I don't know why I've never really got into this theme, and it's kind of funny because there's a lot of films like that where I've got a really eclectic taste in music and I like pretty much everything. It was like the first few Friday the 13th films, I kind of really adored those movies, but I'm not really a big fan of that music either. I'd much prefer the later films, but that's by the by. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to have to try and just cram everything into this commentary, because there's certain films that, like, I can't believe it took me this long to do the commentary, and I can't believe that, some, maybe not this film, because this is kind of pretty obscure, but there's certain films where I've done a commentary for them, something like, say, Hawk the Slayer or Krull. I'm not a commentary for Krull, but films like that, you can understand sci-fi attracting a kind of crowd that will sort of, get like, somebody will do like, there's like the Phantom Menace, there's like 20 DVD fan commentaries for that. And like I say, I jokingly said at the start of the commentary that, like, I can't ever remember, like, say, on Zarbin's page, or just generally, like, because the DVD that I'm doing this commentary from has actually got a commentary track on there. But I'm pretty sure, and I could be way off on this, I'm pretty sure that there's no alternate fan commentaries for a Carry On film. If I'm wrong, I'm not trying to toot me own on by saying, I'm the first in the world, but I think it would just be pretty funny if it is. And if it's not, there's only a couple, I'm sure. But this is a film where, and what's funny when I tell people that, like when I was saying I always do this, the very first few minutes of a commentary would feel so hectic, because I feel like I've got to give up sync points and got to tell what I'm doing the commentary from and what the commentary is, and so it's all like a big jumble of ping-ponging back and forth. If you are trying to sync up, there's a woman just go off the toilet there, which is not very often you can take that. But this is one of those films where, and I'm sure I'm just going to try and put the PlayStation joypad down without making the film fast forward. There we go. It was kind of like I was just like trying to defuse a bomb there. But this is one of those films where, when I try and tell people this is one of my favourite films of all time, I'm not saying it's the best film I've ever seen. Like if somebody said to me, technically on a pure technical level, what are the best films you've ever seen? And it'd have to be things like A Clockwork Orange or Queen Anastasi, or those real classy films, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. They are just for whatever reason, whether like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, one of the first horror films, or Clockwork Orange, just a masterpiece of acting, editing, use of music and everything else. But there's certain films where I just love them for so many different reasons, and whether it be like this, or say the Ben Affleck version of Daredevil, or the films where you tell, or Jaws: The Revenge is another great example, where when I tell people I like these films, I'm sure just people think I'm just taking the piss. And even though I don't care what people think of me, at the same time I've always got this sort of inbuilt thing where I always like to think that I'm being honest and truthful. Talking about the extra tea rounds, I'll just have a sip of my coffee. Sorry about that. But yeah, this is one of those films where, and what I was saying, that, like I say, I like to be considered to being truthful, and it's always one of these things where it's kind of like, when you tell somebody that one of your favourite films of all time is Carry On at Your Convenience, most people, even sort of people from my generation, kind of pull a face and think, yeah, right, as if, But I think certain films, and this is one of them, where when I really I think it's a great film anyway. I think it's completely underrated, especially in comedy. I even hear on my local radio station to actually say this. So they were talking about comedy, and people would phone up what their favourite comedy films were. And I think I can't remember the exact situation, but I phoned up and said Kenny Convenience is probably one of the best comedies of all time. I think it's really up there with like Airplane, Blazing Saddles. These films where, Hot Shots, or films where they just joke, 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 and loads of jokes in the background and loads of different levels that they work on. But I think this is one of those films where, on the one hand, I think, early 70s British comedy, it's just, whoa, all right, darling, that kind of comedy, and, there is elements of that in there. But especially when you think this is from a series of movies that have got so much baggage, so much inherent, people instantly think certain things when you say Carry On. And like I say, when I look at certain films that just literally, a lot of films in a way, but when I look at, say, 10 films that, say, I experienced when I was a kid, that I think literally built up 90% of how I think about movies. And not just in terms of film production or how the film was made, but how people perceive about films, how people talk about films, how people change their minds about films, and buying films on different formats, and seeing these films on telly, and how people talk about these films and things like that. Because this is a film where, again, anybody who knows me, anybody who's listened to any of these commentaries or been a fan of any of the websites that I've been involved with before, or like anybody who just knows me in real life, knows I always stick up for the underdog of films. Like if I see a film that's getting slagged off, even if I've got no interest in that film, it will instantly endear me to it, and it wants me to check it out or buy it or see it at the cinema or something like that. And over the years, it's happened tons of times with films like Catwoman, Geely. But like I say, it started way before that, and completely unknowingly, because when I was a kid and growing up, like say, late 70s, early 80s, and growing up, with the people that I grew up with, like, my family, and we're all obviously older than me, but there was still that huge fan base for the Carry On movies. And still to this day, I can't believe that they aren't still knocking them out. I mean, don't get me wrong, when most of the creative team have died, that's probably a reason. But even so, when they were still alive, the I'm amazed there wasn't no Carry On films through the whole of the 80s, and one in the 90s and things like that. And it's like what? It just barely makes sense to me. But that's by the by. One thing I do, just again talking about films that are underrated or things that should be worthy of note, is that all the Carry On films were directed by the same guy, and I really do think that's something that is unbelievable. If you think any series that's been going for a long time, whether it be James Bond or Godzilla, where there's like 20, 30 films, the fact that, if you said every Bond film was directed by the same person, it'd be a ludicrous thing to say. If you said every Godzilla film had been directed and written by the same people, it'd be ludicrous. But nobody ever mentions that the same two guys made every single Carry On film. And I do think that is definitely just, so I'm actually miming it as I'm doing it, doffing the caption, because it's like, that is an achievement and then some. But yeah, again, sort of ping-ponging back and forth, the bad habit on a commentary. But yeah, one thing about this movie is it really made me realise, and kind of subconsciously, but consciously as well, how people think and judge movies. Because like when I was a kid, anybody I knew basically was into Carry On movies on some level. If there's one on TV, they'd watch it, or certain scenes were iconic. I don't want to really mention any, but everybody knows certain Carry On scenes from certain Carry On movies. But anytime this film was on TV, I used to think it's the same as all the Carry On films. Everybody likes it the same as I do. And that's the thing. So it was like that thing of like, oh, okay, cool, it's Carry On film. But then, and obviously it was pre-internet, so it was like, you'd only see reviews. Actually, just to note, just while that's on the background, the 12th of May, I'll come back to that in a second. But so the 12th of May 1971, which is very unique. I don't think very many films pinpoint to a very specific date. But yeah, so when I was a kid, this film would be on TV, and I'd be, oh great, convenience was on. But anytime you saw a review for it in the paper, it would always get 1 star, and the review, almost universally, without fail, the review would say something like, just toilet jokes, just nothing but toilet humour, 1 star, avoid rubbish. And I was always, it never made sense to me. And it was years before I went to college, it was years before I really knew the mechanics of film, and so I'm just checking the levels. It just seemed like I was getting a bit high up there. Yeah, but so it was always kind of like one of those things where people talked about this film in a certain way. And then over the years, the more, like I say, when the internet started becoming available and seeing more reviews for different things, it was almost instantly, but gradually, if this makes sense, which it really doesn't, but I really felt like there was a shift where people just went from the worst carry-on film, it was a massive flop, it's the only carry-on film that was a flop, didn't make its money back for years and years and years. I say people saying it's just toilet humour, to 5-star reviews, probably the best carry-on, really funny, great story, great performances and things like that. And it really made me, and don't get me wrong, I think the way people, you should change your mind if you get more evidence, more appreciation for something. Yeah, that's perfectly fine, and I understand that, and I get that. But at the same time, I've been constantly amazed where I think, and I know I've got it's a bad habit, like I say, of sticking up for films that are a bit rubbish. But sometimes over the years, I have become sort of, and I feel like I say this on every single commentary, but like in my heart of hearts, I know that certain films are good, but never get no real love. Like things like Halloween 3, and even something like Jaws. One of my cats is being hello, Mindy. She's sitting on the settee with me as I do this commentary. Do you want to talk, Mindy? Do you want to talk? Oh, these crazy cat people. But sorry, stand a sip. Mindy, don't jump on the laptop. Yeah, but where was that? Yeah, but films that really get slagged off a lot, and this was one of those films. And like I say, the more I sort of was trying to defend it, the more I realised just how much was going on in this movie. Like I say, I do genuinely think that it's a great movie. Just really well written, really original, and especially for when you think we're coming from a series of like seaside postcard humour, just like alright darling, oh a bit of boob, that's don't get me wrong, I say part of my heritage, that kind of late 70s British comedy, occasionally it's like you kind of watch it now, and not that it's aged, which it kind of has, but not just that, it's a different time period and things. And talk about time periods, that's really fascinating, and that might be unique in this, excuse me, but with the Carry On films, the ones that are set in the present, excuse me, sorry, I said so much wind when I do a commentary, but with certain films, certain Carry On films, the ones that are set within the present day as it was then, like this, or Carry On Abroad, or Carry On Doctor and things like that, they were set in the late 60s, early 70s, whenever, Carry On Sergeant, the 50s and things. But I much preferred those ones than the ones set in like Henry VIII times, or sort of Carry On Cowboy, that they're a bit more fictionalized, stylized, whatever you want to look at it. And those Carry On films I never really liked much, but the ones that are set like during the 70s, I don't know if it's just pure nostalgia, but when you see them going on like a big old buzz like they do when they go to Brighton later on in the movie, and can't help but thinking that that just reminds me of your childhood and things like that. So I think there is an element of that, but I think up until this point, the Carry On films, they were what they were. Like I said, everybody knows, anybody knows anything about film, you get a certain impression when you think of Carry On movie. You think of, like there, and this is again dovetailing into that Carry On mentality of, he mentioned his penis kind of thing, so it's, but like that kind of comedy, I felt was reduced in this film, and for the better. Even though I don't mind that kind of comedy, but this is one of those films where I think the jokes complete Carry On, and at the same time, like they're talking about like trade unions and things like that. And this was another one of those films where, and don't get me wrong, I kind of love when people are like super passionate about certain things, and obviously things like workers' rights are really important and things like that, obviously. But what is really interesting about films like this, where I just completely assumed that this was one of those films that was people didn't like it because it wasn't the typical Carry On film, and again that endears me to it instantly that they tried something different, because I love films where they go off on a complete tangent and, they don't really fit in with anything else in the series. But then just so many elements of this movie, I won't go so far as say unique, because obviously that's ridiculous, but I mean, you think about the Carry On films. How many Carry On films are set within a hospital or on a summer camp? And you instantly think of things like Halloween 2 was set in a hospital, or Friday the 13th, or things like that. Or like I said, cowboy films. But how many films? I could literally, and again, I could be completely wrong in this, but how many films are set within a toilet factory? That, and again, that's not purely a reason to like that film, but again, completely endears me to it, because it's like, well, it's just a complete great concept that you'd think it wouldn't have gone past that stage of like, let's do a film set in a toilet factory. No, let's not. And then coming from like Britain again, I don't like say it's all these building blocks of different things that, like, when I was growing up, there was like a factory just up the road that made like like I think it was like a wiring factory, and then there was like another factory just up the road that seemed to make everything, and then there was these factories. So again, it's probably this, like say, these building blocks of like, I could sort of picture this. I was a big fan of like, normally I didn't, and again, this film is so counterintuitive to, that might not be the right phrase, but it's so sort of goes against loads of my principles, and I'm doing that in air quotes, that like most films that are like this has always been my motto, sort of my sort of slogan, if you will, that like I always watch films to get away from real life, that like you watch films to be entertained, to take you away from whatever. And so like I'm instantly drawn to like sci-fi things with robots in, time travel movies, horror movies, anything like that. So this, and just because the time period I grew up in, and I think Dave Gorman said the same thing, that if you were born in the mid to late 70s, you can't, I think it's almost impossible, obviously I'm maybe a bit facetious, but it's almost impossible to not be entertained by things like Star Wars, Transformers, Star Trek. But there's so much American culture just filtering through, and I can't remember when I was a kid ever really going to see a British film at the cinema. Probably did, can't really ever remember. So it was always one of those things of kind of like, again when I've mentioned this to people, and because like nearly I'm always talking about like some sci-fi film or something, and then I suddenly say, I love Karen at your convenience, and they're like, of course you do. And it's like say, it's such an anomaly, because there's not that many British films that I instantly just, is to say that, I say there's no quick conspiracy theory, it's just I grew up watching Star Wars, I grew up watching Transformers movie, I grew up watching things like that. So it's like, with me as a kid, it was like, do you want to watch Transformers the movie, or do you want to watch a film set in a factory? And ordinarily I'd be like, no thanks. So so it was like this thing of, again, to be so endeared to this movie, like say when it's like, it's a British film, it's set in a factory. But again, like I say, because it was one of these films that got slagged off so much, it made me realise just how complex this movie was and how layered it was. And again, when you're talking about a carry-on film, people think you're taking the piss. And again, this thing about like this honesty thing, that like I can't say enough good things about this movie. Like I say, just this first portion of the movie. Obviously, you've got a bit of the carry-on human in there. It's like, they take in and put out figures and T and P, and it's like go in the toilet. And again, I think that's one thing I was going to mention. That's another thing about being British. I think there's like slightly repressed about talking about going to the toilet, and it was kind of almost like, you would never really sort of, you would always use some joke to, disguise you just went for a wee, or I'm just going for a pee, or I'm just going for a gypsies, or I don't know if you can say that anymore. But you would always put these slang terms on there. You wouldn't say I'm just going for a pee, or you wouldn't just say I'm going to urinate. You'd put some stupid joke on there. So again, I think it comes from this British thing of you don't talk, we don't stiff up a lip, we don't talk about things like that. So again, it's this thing of I think it comes from that. But then like I say, the first 10-15 minutes of this movie, it's been set in, like I say, it's been set in a factory. It's a great joke, spoiled poetry. But yeah, so it's been set in a factory and everything like that. And then you've got this element now brought into it. It's like you look at the Carry On films, complete change of tack. The wallpaper there always reminds me of a TIE fighter. Could be me being completely mad. I say always reminds me. I noticed it about 2 weeks ago. But so yeah, you've got like this compared to all the Carry On films, this may as well be a documentary. Like it deals with like things like hot potato topics at the time, things like trade union strikes and things like this. And then you've got this element where there's this budgie that can predict horse racing results, and it's kind of like, what? Like, and in a way, I can sort of see why it sort of didn't sort of catch on. So I'm just going to have a good drink. Yeah, so you've got like these kind of realistic elements and these fake elements that like, and I love that kind of, and I've always loved films like that where you can't really pigeonhole, no, you can't really budgie hole them, which is a mad thing to say, but yeah, so it's kind of like this like really fascinating thing, and then the production values of this film, considering, so I feel like I'm going to sneeze, this is ridiculous. Nope, it was full slam. Yeah, so, and then little things in, and like I say, just noting that like wallpaper that looked like a TIE fighter on the wall, and that's like a Rorschach inkblot test. You probably show that wallpaper to like 20 other people and they'd never say that, but the production values on this film are so subtle and so cool that like, and literally, I think I noticed partly on myself, and then partly, reading extra bits on IMDb and things like that, but if you look really subtly in Sid James's living room, you look at the layout of, what they've got, the TV and different things. Excuse me. And then when they start winning on the horses, the house gets really posh. They got a bigger TV, the wallpaper's really nice, everything becomes really elaborate, the clothes change. And then I didn't know this part. I think I noticed that part on myself after about 20 years. And then the card that he gets when he started winning on the horses is it was basically a brand new car at that time. And you can't stop thinking, wow, that is really really cool. That like it was like this thing where like how many people consciously, subconsciously. I mean, this is one of those films as well, and this was about this must have been a good year, 2 years ago. I saw a thread on a message board and somebody said, is there any film you've seen 100 times? And because I've got addictive personality, I can't watch the same thing over and over and over again, but I thought, is there really a film I've watched 100 times? And I know for a fact there's certain music videos and certain things like the Van Halen Live Right Here Right Now, directed by Mitchell Sinaway. I've got that on VHS, and I must have watched that must be really close to 100 times. But any feature film, I was thinking, I know it's a concert movie, but I was thinking of actual feature films that I've watched 100 times, and this must be darn close. I know for a fact I've watched it at least 50, 60 times, easily, and that's not even, close to being an understatement, but it's one of those things where I've got to, it must, because like I say, anytime it's on TV, I'll watch a little bit of it. Like I say, I've got two versions of it on VHS, I've got it on DVD, I've been looking for the Blu-ray of it, and anytime I go to my dad's, especially if I'm drunk, and it's to hand, so it's kind of convenient, bang it on. So I mean, it must be really, really close. I mean, I almost can quote it word for word, and I think, so it's like, one of these films where I think it does hold that in regard. And what's funny, just remind me, Kenneth Cope there wearing a purple shirt, but Bernard Bresslaw as well. I talk about these building blocks of like, where I think, most things you see when you're a kid or when you're growing up, for better or worse, that I think that shapes how you think and see things. But Bernard Breslaw's character in this is called Mr. Hulk. And it's one of these things where you think like, it's called a big half-witted giant. And he plays the giant in Krull, and he plays the Cyclops in he plays the Cyclops in Krull, and he plays the giant in Hulk the Slayer. And so these films, unknowingly, like I say, because at the time I just saw Hulk the Slayer, thought it was incredible. I saw Krull, thought it was incredible. Watched Kind of Convenience, thought it was brilliant. And then like I say, over the years, that you go, oh wow, Bernard Bresslaw was in this film, and he's also named Mr. Hulk, which is so great to me, because this film because I just watched the trailer just while I was setting up the laptop and stuff. I just watched the trailer, and I noticed the bit where they're carrying like inflatable Disney characters, and I can't help but think that's so funny that like you've got a character called Mr. Hulk, I'm pretty sure they never gave no money to Marvel. It's like, should we use these images of Disney characters? Are you going to pay them? Nah, that's massive slander. If they did, I totally apologise. I just think it was such a different time that, like, years ago, computer games were made about, like, and again, you know, I'm sure this is true, that the Lotus 8-bit computer game literally was no deal. It was like, the two main guys, the guy from, like, Jarrell and the guy from Lotus, were like, do you want to make a game about Lotus? Yep, there you go. Handshake kind of thing. I don't think it was a thing to think years ago. It was like, should we name this character Mr. Hulk? Yeah, I'll just have to check that, because even though I've seen this film a million times, I can't believe that he's called Mr. Hulk, because it just seems like one of those things where, even sort of by IMDb standards, it's like, what's really funny as well, because like when you talk about when you say type in carry on IMDb, it always comes up with the other ones. But the great thing about Karen at Your Convenience is once you type in Karen at Your, because it's like there's no others with the at Your in the title. The cast, full cast. I mean, this is the age rule, isn't it? Bernie Hulk. I had a feeling it wasn't. It's spelled Hulk as in HULKE. Still pretty funny though. But yeah, this is like one of those things though as well. And I think with film fans, certain film fans do this and certain film fans don't. I know film fans that would never do this, but I can't help myself. It's like, say, even if, say, I wasn't really watching this, say, sometimes I think, oh, I'll just put a film on in the background, and this is again where I've probably watched this film 100 times, where sometimes I'll generally think, I'll put Kind of Convenience on and watch it, but sometimes you just want a bit of background sort of noise or something, or, just while you're tidying up, or just while you're filling out a form or something, and bang, put Kind of Convenience on. So it's kind of like, again, where it's like, I think why this film is so ingrained into my brain, and it's like, and just things like that. I always got this horse racing book, and the people used to live across the road from me who used to go around, and I used to watch films with them and stuff, and they used to let me record stuff off their Sky. They were big betting people, and they used to have like a ready reckoner like that, where they could work out the bets and stuff. So again, and when he goes to the bookies, it's really funny because now, like, nearly, I can't think the last time when I went to an independent bookies, like, a proper, like, mom and pop, like, bookmakers. But when he goes in the bookmakers in this, and it just reminds me of when you go in, like, at bookies years ago, it's like the Grand National, you'd have to go put your bet on or something, and it'd be proper, like, old blokes in there smoking, and, like, you could tell they were, whiskey drinkers and stuff, and the place would be full of smoke. It was always dead complicated, remember if you had got to pay your tax and all this kind of stuff, so it's got that kind of proper nostalgia factor to me. But as I think I was sort of saying, and sort of, I don't know if I quite got around to saying it or not, but this film really made me sort of think about films in a certain way. Best line in the movie. You'd only call yourself a cockman, wouldn't you? But yeah, so it's like I think it's really interesting that, like, say sort of films like this that like any kind of traditional film series, like even now, very rarely take chances because all people do is complain, like, and then the really messed up thing about films is, you look at the Carry On films, like, people always just say, oh, it's just, like that kind of broad comedy of, like, ogling women and, all that kind of stuff. And then they actually try to do something different, and it took so long for this film to find an audience and get some kind of appreciation that no wonder they just went back to the same old formula. And I know I've touched upon films like, say, Friday the 13th, Halloween, but anytime they try to break away from formula, people just go, nah, not interested, make the same film over and over again. And then they make the same film over and over again, and all people say is, oh, it's just the same thing over and over again. And it's so funny just listening now. I'll be the first time. I'm not a perfect film fan. I know sometimes I come at films from completely the wrong way. But just even things like how they're driving past this Odeon now, and like how the lobby cards were outside and things like that. And it's just so interesting to me that, like, sort of how much has changed, how much has and hasn't changed since. I mean, I wasn't even born when this film came out, and that's another thing as well. When I think of a lot of my favourite films, and again, I think you can't help but be influenced of the time period you grew up in, and no matter whether that was the 40s, 50s, 60s, or the 70s, 80s, 90s. that like you're always going to be. That was the great time because you know you've never seen stuff like that before, and all stuff's brand new and all stuff like that. But that's another thing. What's interesting about this film is, if I was to say most of my favourite films, and again, not just from pure technical level, but just from films that I love seeing on telly or films I can watch over and over again, most of my favourite films seem to be from when I was actually born. But this is one of the few films that it's like, say, I didn't even exist when this film was brand new, but I love this movie, so it's and little moments like this where I feel like this Carry On film is something else. It's like almost an intangible thing, and I think I must have mentioned this and yeah, I almost feel like I've done this commentary before, where it's like, because I've talked about this film so many times on so many different things, like say, just basically anytime I'm speaking, basically. But because I've spoken about this film so many times, I almost feel like I'm almost doing like a speech almost, or something, that like I feel like that it's my duty to defend this movie and sort of, because like say occasionally it does sail a fine line. I'll be the first to admit it. They're like, but one of those things where kind of like say I will be like, sort of, thinking, oh, thank God that, it wasn't just like, that it didn't, you think, oh no, it's going to be really, really sexist. Oh my God, it's going to be like really, really racist. It's like, whoa, it got really close to it, kind of thing. You're like, oh no, it's like, sort of, and then, like I say again, and if just because I'm biased and things like that, but I thank my lucky stars of all the kind of, early 70s, early 80s kind of British comedy films that I could enjoy. That this was one of those films where it's like, occasionally, we're like smacking someone's arse or something, like, oh no, it's like, and I think you can just about, well, it was a different time, and, and it was like, it was quite, it wasn't real filthy like, it kind of was, but it's like this, like, and then, the bit later on where they go watch the film at the cinema, the film that's been banned. And just before it, like, there was the B movie on, like, like say years ago, what they would do, like say with stuff like that like kind of thing, that like, there would always be like a sort of, that kind of thing of like, there'd be an A and a B picture, and I can remember that really clearly from when I grew up and things like that. So it's kind of like, you would sort of like, so when you go to see the film later on, and then there's one point where Bruno Breslow says, I didn't spend like $5 to watch a load of idiots make an Irish stew. Every single time, just before that line, like I say, I've seen this film, hundreds of times. I've seen this film loads of times, maybe well over 100, maybe just under, but a lot anyway. And every single time when he says that line, they're like, please don't say a racist word, please don't say a racist word, please don't say, and it's like, whew, that was close. But yeah, it's like scenes like this, I think, really sort of elevate that movie, where it's kind of like, elevate this movie where it feels real. And again, this is what I love about this movie, how it's like how I talked about before, ping-ponging back and forth between different things. I kind of love how this film can be realistic, and at the same time they talk about a budgie that can predict the future, and that's why I adore this movie so much. And again, why it just makes me realise why I think the way I do, and not just about just movies, but just generally, that the way I do come at things from such weird angles, and that, like, and I've said before, I've said to people, I've said on message boards, it's really funny because on the one hand I always think, yeah, I'm just a normal guy, I'm an alright guy, like I like, just like having a beer and, things like that, and, I like Batman, and then I look at films in such a weird way, and like, if anybody listens to my Psycho 1998 commentary, and I'm like, raving madman when I talk about that film, like, like, and then, like, say, when I stick up for Jaws' Revenge, and, different things, or when I've slacked off things like BBC How I Played in the past, or it's become such an in-joke between people who know me, or when I, like, say, I look at sport in such a weird way, or I look at, like, comedy, and then I'm like, when I look at films like this, I really can see why it really makes all the sense in the world that, like, kind of, that when, like, say, a scene like this where it's a typical British, if you was watching this with the sound down, this could be anything. This could be any British comedy. This could be any sort of, George and Mildred, or Bless This House, or all that kind of British stuff. I mean, and obviously you're going to think it's Carry On film because it's Hattie Jakes and Sid James on the scene, so you're going to probably instantly think Carry On. But if you was watching this with the sound down, you would never think it would be about a budgie that can predict the future. And then after they run like that, it's so great that, like, I just can't believe it. When you get people talking about carry-on films, and again, I don't like to mention certain scenes because I feel like I'm giving him more fuel to the fire again. It's a bit like James Bond. That I love the James Bond movies, but anytime you watch a documentary of James Bond, it's always, oh, do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die. And, they always show you that the same 4 or 5 scenes. Don't get me wrong, perfectly understandable. But there's so many parts in James Bond that I really do feel like that one scene in again, a great British institution, a great scene in a James Bond movie that I always feel like doesn't get nowhere near enough credit is when in License to Kill, when Timothy Dalton's in Ernest Hemingway's house, and he says he's resigning, and M says, "Oh, your license is revoked," and all that. I think that's a brilliant scene, one of the best acted scenes in a James Bond film. Nobody ever talks about it. I don't think I've heard anybody mention that scene apart from me, and I think it's beautiful. And then, and that kind of in a way leads me to my next book. So that film's called License to Kill, and I was thinking, Timothy Dalton doesn't like that title. I've never been a particularly big fan of that title. And then again, it's got the Death Wish 3 thing about it that people don't know what the word, because it was going to be called License Revoked, and people don't know what revoked means, so you've got to call it License to Kill. And again, it creates all this kind of, there's an extra sort of, an extra layer on there that, so I always find that kind of interesting. And it's like the title for this movie. In America, it's called Carry On Round the Bend. There's somebody selling a VHS of that on eBay, and I'll have to get that because I really want to see an American print, even just to see how that title comes up. I still haven't seen it all these years later. I'll have to try and get that this week. But yeah, so and this is another thing about films that don't do very well, and I think it's a small element, but I definitely think it adds fuel to the fire kind of thing. Again, choose that phrase. But I think if it's got a title that you can't pronounce, or a title that doesn't come to mind easily, like something like Geely. Even now, I'm not saying it right, but I feel like Count at Your Convenience. Even though now the public toilet's just down the road, it says public convenience. So even now, 2015, to time stamp the commentary. Again, I'll get to that 12th of May in a second. I can't hope I remember. But yeah, so this film is like kind of wow, brain freeze. This film's called Count at Your Convenience. They still use the phrase Count at Your Convenience. That's funny, I said about forgetting, then my mind's went completely blank. So yeah, this film's Count at Your Convenience. And even when I was a kid growing up, like I said earlier, that people did used to sort of dance around using, you never get like now, you probably get somebody, especially it's a bunch of lads together saying, oh, I'm just going for a piss, I'm just going for a shit or something, pardon my language, but you get people using those words. But even people years ago, people never used to really say that. They'd say, I'm just going for a tinkle, or I'm going to spend my 2 pence worth, or whatever, that kind of thing. And then, so like even the title Count at Your Convenience, I can see it's got, there's some, I can see why there's some parlance to it. I don't think that's completely the wrong word, but there's some. I can see why it's called. That kind of makes sense. I don't think I can never consciously remember. Like I said, I was a big fan of this film, and again, like that kind of, coming from a generation that didn't talk about the toilet in that way. That like I can never remember anybody saying, "I'm just going to the convenience," or "Go at your convenience," and it's like, so again, it's got this thing of that extra thing built into this movie that kind of ruined it, for the normal people. I think that, it's like, Count at Your Convenience, what the hell does that mean? But this is another thing as well. This where the film's been refused a certificate, but it's been granted one by the local council. Again, this is something where that is so pertinent, and even now, like from what I can gather, that like a film, like from the British Board of Film Classification, can sort of, a film can be in fact banned and illegal to release in the UK. Then if your local council says, no, it's fine, show it if you want. And I kind of love British laws like that. That even though that law is still going, I've never, it always kind of makes me laugh to think that like, the censorship laws in this country are so crazy. And this is like that scene I was mentioning. Like I can remember bookies like that were just so sort of, intimidating if you were a little kid. Well, not intimidating, never really, but you always felt weird being in there. You felt like you shouldn't be in there as a kid. If you were just running in there fine, your dad was. Oh, but that's another thing as well. To whip it in again, it's ridiculous really, because it's bold as brass. It says to whip it in there. but I honestly don't think I noticed that joke until at least 10 years ago. And it's like, you think, it's like, oh, whip it in, see what they did there. But again, I think this is where this film, again, just tried to be that little bit more subtle about it. It wasn't just like, oh, let's go the whip it in, that kind of, So, again, they just took the foot off the gas a little bit. And all those typical carry-on jokes are still in here, but because I think they are a little bit more subtle, or they were focusing on other things. I really do think that, like, with a film like this, that kind of like, again, your typical, typical hardcore carry-on fan. And again, I don't mean this nasty, because, like I say, I mean, like I say, I know I've been pretty sort of. I remember when I first watched Jason Goes to Hell. And Jason Voorhees is only in it for like about 5 minutes, and I remember like, didn't have Jason, it's rubbish. And then you're like, you're watching it and you think, oh, thank God they did that. And in the classic case of, there's a documentary coming out soon called The Death of Superman Lives, because there was going to be a Superman film made in the 90s that was going to be really weird. It was going to have all this stuff, and then like Superman was going to wear a black costume and not fly, and the bad guy was going to be like a brain in a jar. And at the time, that film didn't get made. I was like, oh, thank God for that, we dodged a bullet. And it's like, oh no, we've got this amazing Superman film. And it's like, I think with this film, like I say, and I loved this film from the very first time I saw it, but I could see why you hardcore carry-on fan that just wanted to, see some boobs and, people screaming, woo, you're out, love. Watching this film would be like, oh, well, that's a shame. It's all about trade unions. You got this freaking budget that can predict the future. It's it is what it is. It's not exactly Inception or something, but for a British comedy movie from the 70s, it's a bit weird. So it's kind of, I can see why this film struggles, but at the same time, it's like, I know I've said it 5 times already, but it really just makes you think, well, that's a shame, isn't it? It's like when John Carpenter, when he wanted to do a different Halloween film every year, like a story based around Halloween, but not using the Michael Myers character, and nobody was interested. And it's just like, oh, and it's just so interesting. And like I say, again, I think I mentioned this. I think when I did a Police Academy commentary, that like, you've got like a younger generation being filtered in, like slightly younger actors. You've got your Sid James and Ajay Jakes on this kind of stuff, and then you've got all these new people coming in, and I can't believe that, like I say, that especially in the 80s, yeah, fair enough, when, like you say, the directors, writers, sadly passed away, it kind of makes sense, and especially when they wrote and directed all of them, that them dying does put a nail in the coffin. But now he's got this brand new car that was brand new in 1971. But yeah, so it's kind of like, you can, but I can't believe that there wasn't at least a couple of Carry On films made in the 80s, and from what I can gather, there was scripts. I think it was going to be like Carry On Dallas, and I think it was going to be a Carry On Set in Space or something like that, and they all just fell through and stuff. And then that's another thing as well about movies, again, what made me look at movies in a certain way, I'm talking about The Death of Superman Lives, that what's really funny in a way, the films that do exist, almost what's more interesting is the films that didn't get made. When you look at how close they were, how close they weren't, and like for years and years and years, they were going to make this film called Carry On London. A number of times I read that, Such a Body's on board, there's a script, they're going to film it now, 2 weeks from now, and then it's like, it's all fell through, and then 6 months later, they're going to make Carry On London again. No, they're not. They're going to make it again. No, they're not. And so it's kind of interesting when you sort of start reading up on films that it really is fascinating to me that, like, I do kind of love seeing, like, when, like, that, like, Mad Max Fury Road's out at the moment, and I think, like, about 10, 15 years ago, they were literally going to start filming it, and it was like, and then they built sets, built cars and everything, Mel Gibson was going to be in it, then I think, like, the Iraq War broke out, and it's like, oh, no, we can't film it now, and gone, like, and then I think they were going to film, like, Rambo 4 years before it even come out, and nothing, it's really fascinating. And then what's really interesting as well, talk about, like, say, I mean, like I said before many times, I'm a sucker for a good coincidence, and I love kind of looking for, like, sort of, reference points everywhere. But literally, I went with my dad the other day, and my dad was watching Touch of Frost, this British detective show with David Chasing in, and there was a guy in there, and I was like, where do I know that actor from? And it was like, when you're like, where do I know that guy? It was like tip of my tongue kind of thing. And like I say, I've just checked, what Bernard Breslau's name was. I was named, Hulk and that, and the spelling notes there. I was like, that guy looks definitely that guy looks definitely. And I was like, is he the dad from Clockwork Orange? And I thought, maybe he is. And so I whipped my phone out and, fired up, Clockwork Orange, and found, although his character's named Dad, but he was like, clicked on it. and then scroll through his like IMDb page. And he was in Touch of Frost. I was like, oh my god, it isn't. And then, because I knew he was going to be doing this commentary, so like, I sort of was just scrolling through his page, and it was like, yeah, no, Touch of Frost, blah, 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 Clockwork Orange. Then right next to Clockwork Orange, he was in Canny of Convenience. So it's like, oh my god, it's like, somewhere like Canny of Convenience, which is genuinely like, something like Clockwork Orange, people genuinely say that, like, it's this amazing film, dead well respected and all these kinds of awards and everything, and then it's not like Kind of Convenience. They've literally got like a literal connection, but it's like scenes like this where it's like it's like But then again, this is what's really funny. Where, like, say with me, like, say I'll be the first to admit that I'm kind of old-fashioned, and I sometimes I'll find myself saying some phrase like I'll be saying like oh, I remember when the veg man came round. I'm like, oh my god, I am like so old-fashioned. Or I'll say, oh, remember you could put half pences in payphones. I'll be like, oh god, you're right, granddad, kind of thing. So it's this kind of thing where, like, sort of, like, I know that I'm kind of old-fashioned, but that there, we was just looking at it bending over and stuff, and you're like, but again, I'll be the first to admit that, hold me hand up, I love this film, but you think, I've got to find a bird at Cheltenham, and this leads perfectly into my next point, that, like, on the one hand, you sort of go, oh, just literally staring at a woman running over, and they're all shocked. But yeah, so you think, oh, okay, hold my hand up, that part of this film was aged terribly. It's like we're just ogling women in, oh, right, darling, all that kind of stuff. Not many times I said, oh, you're right, darling. But we just said bird, and that's what's really fascinating. I'm really amazed that, like, and completely rightfully so, nobody likes being sexist, racist, homophobic, and I'm dead glad that, all those terms are disappearing. But I am constantly amazed that, say, you could watch a film like this and think, oh, we aren't like that anymore, try not like that anymore. I'm amazed how many people say the phrase bird, and I don't mean in regard to the avian variety, how many people, and on things like YouTube or Ustream or things like Twitter, and things that you think would have a relatively young audience, that I'm amazed you see somebody in their 20s and they go, whoa, that sexy bird downtown. And you're like, that word, the phrase bird is still knocking around. Not even as a joke, sometimes I'll say something really stupid, and I'll know my heart of hearts I've said as a joke, and I'll say, oh, just kidding, I'm just being an idiot. I don't think I could go downtown, even if you're with your mates and you're drinking, go, oh, seeing that sexy bird over there. I do not know whether that phrase is still, in 2015, I don't know anybody with a straight face can say that, and I am really amazed that, like, because, like I say, when I come from this culture of, like, say, the late 70s, early 80s, and I've said this on a few things, that, like, if I was going to be born sometime this century, I'm dead glad I've been born when I was, that, like, in the sense that, grew up with all the really old-fashioned stuff, like outside toilets, again, tying into this, I grew up in a time period where, there wasn't much on TV, there was, like, 2 channels, and, if you had a computer, it was like, oh my god, or if you saw a computer anywhere, it was like, oh, such a big deal, and, all these different things. So, like, but then again, I can't believe that, like, I grew up in this culture where all this stuff was new, or basically new, or people still acted and spoke like this all the time. It was everywhere. But at the same time, it's like, wow. Like, and again, when I was saying about it, I can't believe these films aren't still being made. It's like, say, if people weren't like this anymore, there you go. Okay, fair enough. Different time, certain films you can see why they're not being made anymore. Just makes complete sense. I mean, just certain, I mean, mine's gone completely blank, but just certain film series or film concepts, you think, oh, we've gone past that now, and nobody wants to see that kind of stuff anymore. But Carry On films, and I think I said before when we did a Police Academy commentary, that I feel like that, why the Police Academy films be made all the time, where you can get literally a young generation of comedians and use it as like a jumping off platform, but do loads of different things. And I think even more so with the Carry On films, that you've got this freedom to basically get a group of comedians, do a film about anything. So why these, and these films are still popular. Like, I think it was about 2 months ago, there was like a 3-hour documentary about Carry On films on one of the main channels. Like, I think it was on ITV4. It was like, an hour each night and stuff. And, people still talk about these films on telly all the time. And this was probably about 6-7 years ago now. I think I must have mentioned this on a few commentaries, but it always blows me away, and I still, to this day, I still can't believe this. But I think it was in the Sun. My dad brought the Sun all the time. Mum and dad brought the Sun, and there was a free coupon, like go to your local Blockbuster. Amazing, show no old is because there's only about 2 Blockbusters left now. But it was like, take this coupon to go to your Blockbuster to get Carry On Camping on DVD. And I didn't think much of it. My dad said, "Oh, do you want to go up?" Okay, it's like, yeah, okay. So we got in the car, drove up to the local Blockbuster. There was a queue of people to get this film, and like it's on. Basically, and I almost mean this as a joke that like that that Carry On at your convenience. It's like Carry On Camping could be on TV right now, and there was a queue for get this DVD. So I think it shows there's still this popularity there. But even this scene there is great. Like sort of talk about making people redundant and sort of a waste park fitter and a tap fitter could do it in, and they're doing each jobs at the same time. What's wrong with that? No. Oh, it's not my job to give solutions. Like I say, like I say, line for line, that like it is almost this thing of like sort of, and this is such a great, and again, probably where something as simple as this scene is that like sort of you can the waste park and the tap fitter and sort of like this scene of it and he does it up and it's like but again like trying to come up with solutions for things, weird solutions for things. I think it's probably come from this film, and again I'm probably reading a bit more to it than is actually there, but it's like wow. And like but what's really fascinating about this film, like I say, and I can't believe that I haven't already, like I say, and again it's just proper because I've talked about this film. Sorry, I've just had enough. Excuse me. I've talked. Oh, jeez. I've talked about this film in so many different configurations, so many different websites. I almost feel like I've done this commentary before, but like that scene with the B-days, like I still can't believe. Like, say this film came out before I was born. Fast forward all these years later, and I don't think I've ever seen a B-day in real life. I don't try and think if I have or not. I've definitely not used one. I always remember there was a thing in the junior school where I grew up where it was like, I think it was like something called like washing your feet in or something, which again ties into this, but I always think that's the closest I've come to seeing a B-day. But it's really fascinating because I have seen this film so many times and I've got such a soft spot for it that like I say, I really hope that like say, that like, well I say really hope because it has found an audience and it has sort of, it has got, kind of the respect it deserves now. I feel like that, people look at this film in a completely different way, and it is kind of interesting because, like I say, this film just really just does dovetail into it again. But again, how it kind of evolved and kind of like, because, and I didn't just take this film as, it was a film that I liked. It was a great comedy. You're looking at the history of the film and the baggage it brought with it, all the stuff about trade unions and workers and strikes and all this kind of stuff, and then even things like that where she said about having a bottom punch, you're like, well, that was a thing, and don't want to get this commentary too sort of serious, but you do like all these things have been in the press recently, and a load of women saying that when they were in the 70s it was like such a common thing, and you're like, wow, jeez, and and then it's like, but like say just sort of. Obviously, when I was a kid, I didn't drink. I know it was like, probably could have never wanted to. But yeah, sort of getting into like drinking and stuff. So when they go on the trip to Brighton, that film has got a completely new element to it because like when I started drinking and watching this film when I'd been drinking, it's like, oh my god, they're all getting hammered and I'm hammered too, yay! But what's always really funny about this film as well is that like they were smoking that pipe, and again it kind of just dovetails perfectly into this certain films where again I know I'll put this on the website on the what film was it we did the commentary for? It was Death Wish 3. But when I was saying about like there's certain things that if I see in a film, again, not a deal breaker. I know people think I'm taking the piss when I'm saying this, but literally it's just if these things are in a film, always just reassuring to me if anybody uses a payphone, if anybody smokes, if anybody drinks J&B, I always feel like and they're not all in this film, but he's smoking a pipe. Somebody uses a phone later on, a landline phone, and they all get hammered, and so it's kind of like But yeah, this is one thing as well. And I really do feel like that, like this is like, God, geez, so geeky am I with this film. But because like now, in the film, it's the 12th of May 1971. Like when they were sort of trying to go on strike, and you saw that picture that said the 12th of May 1971. And it made me think, how many films can you really specifically know the exact date that the film is meant to be taken, the exact time that, because you could go, well, it's meant to be set in the year it's released in. If it's summertime, you could vaguely say, well, it's going to be June, July, that kind of thing, or that kind of, that kind of period, May, June, July. But then it's like, literally, this has been timestamped to 12th of May 1971. And so I asked for info on a website, and they will know who they are when it was Gallifrey base. And I started a thread on there saying what happened on the 12th of May 1971. I'm sure everybody was like, nobody actually figured out what it was, because on this message board I did actually say I love kind of inconvenience, and I was like, you're a madman, like, kind of thing, paraphrasing. But I don't think nobody really believed me, but I really do love it, as you can tell. So I started this thread on the 7th of May, funny enough. I said, God, I didn't realise I said that, that's quite funny. I said, "Is anything? What happened on the 12th of May? Can anybody give me any info?" Because I thought, the more people you've got out there looking for information, the easier it will be, to find out stuff. And I had a quick look online, and the one thing I found out, and somebody else found it, was that Mick Jagger got married on this day. So on this day in 1971, Mick Jagger was getting married. And one thing as well, touch wood, as I'm saying, but I hate saying stuff like this. But like I say, this film, 1971, this film existed before I was alive. But when Vic Spanner was trying to organise that strike, there was a picture of the Queen on the wall behind him. Fast forward all these years later, we've still got the same Queen. And now, Mick Jagger, it's like Mick Jagger was still alive. So it's like, oh my God, can you believe that? Oh, yeah, another thing, he was in Rather Hot Crit Deceased, so it's like, oh, that fantasy element. Anyway, so just going through this thread, and thank you to everybody that posted. What does other people put? The Yankees beat Milwaukee behind Mal Stottlemyre's three-hit pitching 3-0 on a 50-degree day at Milwaukee's Old Country Stadium. That's something else that happened on the 12th of May. I still don't get this thread. Just going through it. It was the 97th anniversary of the Battle of the Bloody Angle at Sportslania Courthouse, one of the most savage of all the Civil War battles. Cardiff drew with Wrexham in the second round of the Welsh Cup. This will have Wrexham have the title. And Lamie Turner was born on that day. So all that stuff I've just mentioned was happening right on this day, as it was happening. Obviously, it wasn't filmed on that day, but and that's one thing I love about again, when you know the history of the carry-ons, or the history of something. And again, it doesn't matter, but it kind of does. And I was thinking, I wanted this on a 55-inch TV. It's interesting. We could try and see what the tax says. I always think that looks really dangerous. I always think how many drunk people have dived over there, just paralyzed or killed themselves. And so the history of something, but they literally film this on the way to Brighton because it was so cheap. It's like, and I don't like saying trivia that's well known because it's pointless, but so I've just not but here that the person who run this hotel actually was somebody who worked on one of the Carry On films, so it's like there's that kind of history there. But what's always really interesting as well, I kind of, again, it's kind of been written into the script, so it's not like, oh, it's a coincidence, but I kind of love stuff like this where all them strikes he organised and stuff like that. And again, it's obvious script writing. It's kind of like one-upmanship and stuff, where it's like, oh, they've got a strike, they can't do that, and so it's kind of like but like I say, it is interesting that the few sort of strikes that I've lived through that that were sort of pertinent to me, or that pertain to me, that kind of like I remember when the teachers went on strike during the 80s, and what's funny is obviously as a kid, all I was interested in was like, my teachers go on strike, so I have a day off, and I think like one of my teachers went on strike the whole time, and but I think recently the train driver was going to go on strike, and it's kind of really interesting. I think, like I say, I'm so stupid that that things like trade unions and stuff, I don't really, sort of, ever look into it deeply enough to sort of, whose side to be on, kind of thing. Because, like I say, obviously, you want the best rights for the workers, and you don't. Then again, sometimes, I just don't know. I aren't sort of clever enough to really talk about it. Really, I don't know anything about it. But again, I think it does timestamp this to, from what I can gather, people doing like 3-day weeks and things like this. So it's like one of these things where it's like speed up footage. If there's any J&B behind that ball, it'd be incredible. Probably should be. But what's great about this though as well, like I say, when you know the history of something or the culture that there's such a drinking culture in Britain that this is they probably filmed this just on the just like at the end of the shooting, just like they probably had a rap party and then just it's a lot's filming. Probably not really. From what I can gather, most of the Carry On team didn't really like as we say, I'm not drunk. I was drunk yesterday, but. Yeah, from what I can gather, that the Carry On team didn't like each other that much, so they probably wouldn't want to be in the same room for, same. God, jeez, what's wrong? They probably wouldn't have wanted to be in the same room as each other for longer than they had to be. So, in the face. And this is what's really funny about this last. Again, talk about almost completely differently. I've noticed that can't be had the reception before, but I'll tell as well. Oh my god! But this is one of those things, where compared to another most Carry On films, the storyline's quite is what it is, and it's just basically a series of jokes based around that thing. But this has actually got real characterization in these last few scenes where. It's like Mert Plumber and stuff, sort of, will they, won't they kind of thing, and, it ping pongs back and forth so many times during this last 10-15 minutes of the film, and then, and then this is one of those things where, I always think it's really funny that, again, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, if you saw anybody that, sort of any sort of teenagers that did anything stupid, you always get the older generation going, we were never like that, not like that in my day. And as as an idiot kid, you'd kind of think, maybe it wasn't. But again, the more you research and stuff, or the more you just find out stories and things. And again, talk about again, then it's a commentary for Carry On. I don't want to get too serious, but in the sense that talk about people being molested while they're at work, and it's one of these things. It's geez, that actually happened, and here, obviously this is an exaggeration. This probably never really happened, but when you get adults that were drunk, that would beat people up or punch people or start fights and things like that, there, I think this is kind of an interesting thing that because this is on film and it's it came at 1971, people knew. And here where the guy says skinheads, that it was an actual term that there was skinheads, there was people that would and I do think that's interesting that there is that they acted like complete arseholes in that scene, and again when you watch it as a kid, it's it's the Carry On regulars having a wacky time, and it's kind of there's a payphone, so nobody's used it but it's unshot. And one thing I would love to do, because one thing I'd like to talk about filming locations videos, that I'm pretty sure, I don't know if a pier did burn down in Brighton, so this might not still be there. I don't know why I laughed, because it's not funny, but I think a lot of their stuff in Brighton's still the same, so it'd be kind of cool to do a filming locations video. But they've got that Disney merchandise, and I know they barely look like the people that it's supposed to be, but that the BAC, I'd be either way if they actually paid to use them, or if they didn't, because from what I can gather from films anyway, that there's loads of director commentaries, and they'll be saying, we have to pay 15 grand for use this poster, or we have to pay we have to ask permission for use this, and if they get denied permission, they can't use it. And I just love the fact that they're a film that was released in hundreds of UK cinemas, showing Disney characters, and they're no, we won't bother asking. I say, I could be completely wrong with that. They could have completely asked for permission, so I don't know. But what's really funny about this as well, I wouldn't be surprised if this was just either just filmed on a normal day, which you ever find? I wouldn't be surprised if this was just filmed on a normal day, or was it filmed on 4 AM on a Sunday morning, just had to make it look like it was a normal day. And Crystal, what's your balls? I quite agree. But they're, I feel like some cockles now. But again, this is a thing where, again, it could be completely generational. I don't know enough people to know otherwise. But now, if I ever go anywhere like Blackpool Railway, or just even local supermarket for that matter, Like I always have like, sorry, not the mic again. I always have like, I love like cockles and mussels and things like that. So, but again, is this a completely generational thing? I know you can still, well, last time I went Blackpool, I had mussels and stuff, but but this again, back in the future. Uh, but again, it's like little things like that, like it's got this like almost like that, even just as a joke, talking about like, well, he's got a budgie that can predict the future, but even just saying it's a joke that about the future, it's got that like carry on film with a sci-fi flavouring to it. It's brilliant. But what's brilliant though as well, this next scene, it's got some of the absolute brilliant things that, like, in a way, it's got a man dressed as a woman, which is always hilarious. Then you've got the people in the scene don't know it's a man dressed as one. You don't even recognise him. You think they work with him. And then the fact that they do the classic thing as well. They always do the Back to the Future joke. You're talking about, like, again, talking about, oh wow, head of the game, no pun intended. That, like he says about, you're having like 14 kids, and he's like, no, it's some of my kids, and then the fact that they do another classic joke of, obviously he's the chairman of a company, and they say like, oh, well, you're a cloakroom attendant, and they make him like sound like a right, idiot, like, oh, not an idiot, but like this is like, they deliberately belittling him, things like that, like, it's got them, again, it's got these comedy cliches in, but completely. I can't really think about rephrasing it, but in the sense that, like I say, it's not just like, ooh, boobs. It's like, it's not, and again, it's not necessarily clever, but it's like, it's got real traditional comedy in it, but it's kind of like messed up, like, because it's got this future stuff too. W. Miss Woodlands. What's really funny, I've heard loads of people say this as well when they do commentaries, especially if it's a film they like, that they end up just forgetting themselves and just watching it, like, and it's like, I think I've done pretty good. I've got an hour and 6 minutes into it, and before I've suddenly started, do you ever find Sid James dressed as woman? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding as well. He's got balloons for boobs. But what's so brilliant though as well, that like I sometimes think, I'm obviously not the sharpest tool in the box, but sometimes I feel like my comedy's pretty sophisticated, and sometimes you think, oh, it's like somebody's got pretending to be a woman and got balloons as boobs, but that's one thing that's funny as well. And again, this is one thing I've got proper like nostalgia for, is that seeing it there, that it said 5p for a go on this ride, and it's like you think, wow, 5p. And I know it was 1971, but wow, 5p. Like when I was a kid, that like, you could get like 10p mixtures, and it was 10p to make a phone call and things like that. But it's like, wow, 5p. Like, what does 5p get you nowadays? But again, this is a great scene where I was kind of just messing about with the editing software a few days ago. And I used some of the footage from inside this ghost train to almost, like, again, this is cliche, and I kind of hate myself for doing it, that like try to make a comedy look like a horror, and like, using the footage of the skeleton coming up and things like that. And the fact that, you can almost, one of the few Carry On films where I feel like you could even convincingly do that, it's got this, again, these like, this ghost train spooky element to it. This like, it's like, what? Obviously Carry On Screaming. But again, Carry On Screaming, this is, and I'm going to take flack for this, I'm sure. But what's really funny with Carry On Screaming, like I say, as a kid, still do, love fantasy movies, love sword and sorcery movies, adore horror movies. But Carry On Screaming, I still, to this day, and don't get me wrong, it is a great movie, and I think it is probably one of the best Carry On movies. But I still, to this day, don't quite know why that film had that reputation. And especially, again, you can almost see now people go, they like the horror elements, they like how it's filmed, and things like that. But Carry On Screaming, everybody loves that movie. And it's weird because I've watched it more recently and it is good. It is a funny film, don't get me wrong. But you think, me being a horror sci-fi fan, I would instantly be drawn to Carry On Screaming, and I never really was. But again, with this, it was always just like the best of the best to me. But again, just, people, never just got like he's on like a rocket or something. Again, there's like little things like that, like you can tell us that's like a pickup shot that they from like a completely different time. But what's really funny though as well, and this is almost like sort of, this has happened so many times, almost can't believe it, but like how Kenneth coped in this, and then for years and years and years, like, you know, like he was in Coronation Street and I never realised, and it always makes me laugh, like, you know, somebody like, say, oh, jeez, what's his name? Toby Jones' dad. Wow, your mind's gone completely blank. Anyway, Toby Jones' dad, he was in Emmerdale for years and years and years. And it's like, you know, it's like, wow, like when Simon Corkdale was in like Casualty for years and years and years. I only found out like as soon as they leave, you know, it's like, that was close, so I watch those shows. Again, no what's point about this, it's like, and it's awesome. It's just like, let's do speeded up footage for 10 minutes. But what's always really funny about this though as well, like I say, just, you know, I hate deconstructing films like this, but when you kind of, you know anything about filmmaking, I guarantee they literally just filmed them getting on and off the bus about 5 times, filmed these shots of like, you know, the signs outside the pubs, and then was like, you know, like there when just that's probably the only other shot that's got anything to do with this, like when they pulled into, I bet that was actually beer though. God, what is Toby Jones' dad's name? I've got to find that out now. He was in Krull with Bernard Breslow. Oh, what was his name? Freddie Jones. And I clicked him before I read it, honest. Freddie Jones. But even this is like one of these things I want to say about like this repressed Britishness about, like, you know, sort of anything toilet related. Like, again, probably why this film might not, like, there, how did they get around showing you loads of people going for a pee? Literally speeded up footage of him running into some woods. I always like this scene, where he's accidentally peed on himself when he's like trying to dry slack. I think every bloke's done that at some point, right? And that's one thing I did love about the 70s and 80s though, that like, again, it's become a bit of a cliche to say this really, but the fact that like sort of like there Bernard Breslow's got like a bright orange shirt on. I don't think I'd no, I don't think I'd feel comfortable wearing a bright orange shirt. No, not, you know, not for a particular reason, just, you know, just like I'd be like, I won't just think, yeah, I'll wear a bright orange shirt. He's drunk in the back of a bus. But this is a scene here. This is one scene that I really do think completely elevates this above any other Carry On scene. Is that like there's nothing quite like this in a Carry On film, I don't think. Either it's set in the real world, it's set in, like, you know, it's a contemporary movie for the Carry On series, and just the emotion in the scene, and just the fact that they took, you know, they really should be together when they're with partners that aren't who they should be with, and it's set at night time, and, you know, you just always think, oh, they should go around, but bloody sorry neighbours, and, you know, and just the scene, it's just, you know, a 1-2 minute scene, perfection. You know, and you know, again, like I say, I'm, you know, probably over egging it, but, you know, you think there was 31 Carry On films, nothing even close to being, you know, replicated. You know, it's brilliant. And again, like I said before, when you think how much, again, realism is in the scene, how much heart is in the scene, and you think he's going home now, so he's got a budget that can predict the future. You know, how do those two things even go together? It's literally like, you know, it's things that, you know, it's like, you know, it's like sometimes when I picture myself doing like a weird sandwich, like, you know, I'll have like crab paste and cheese on the same sandwich. You think that should not work, and it probably doesn't, because I'm mental. But that great scene. What's funny, because I've got a rotary dial telephone like the one on her bedside table there. But that's what was always funny about the Carry On films though as well. And again, you know, you never thought like this as a kid, but like, say that, like, you know, characters, real name has just left me head for a moment, but like characters like her, that, you know, she was always like as if, I don't want to say a certain word, because the word I was going to say is ugly, but, you know, a lot of people say, oh, she's just an ugly plain woman, and that's, I don't want to use that word because it's not the right word, it's not, but she's a plain woman. But as an adult, and you think, well, she wasn't really, and it's just really weird thing. Like, and again, talking about, like, say, I don't want, you know, make it too dark or too serious, because it's like, but I really do feel, again, this film picked up, again, sort of like the way that, like, she is an attractive woman, really. Like, got that milfy quality and stuff like that. But like there is all these sort of reputation for, like, sort of being, like, sort of body image and sexism and things like that. Like, women can't live up to certain things, men can't. But like that, and this is this thing where, like, I feel like, like, say, this weird thing, and again, like, I feel like that, say, sometimes, there's certain groups, I was talking about, like, the racism thing earlier, that, yeah, completely so glad that racism and sexism, rexism, because people from Wrexham, that sexism and, homophobia and sort of racism, all that stuff is, seems like it's, on the way out, hopefully, touch wood. But when you talk about things like feminism and sexism, to paraphrase Chris Rock, when he talks about, like, women giving birth, women have got it way rougher than, women after women's problems and all these different things. And like in this film, where women are, a lot of women are basically sex objects and things like that. It's like, ooh, right, love and stuff like that. It's like, wow. But that there, she just said to him, like, oh, I've seen men, you aren't that much different. And he, like, looks at himself, and he's, like, obviously a skinny guy and stuff. And I do think, like, that it's a shame that, well, to me, it's like, everybody should be treated the same. Man, woman, black, white, no matter what country from, gay, straight, all the rest, like, blah, 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 blah. But like that, it was like, she was slagging off a man for how he looked. That's just as bad, So it's kind of like, it's like this thing where you think, on the one, you think, sexism, But then again, I'd like to say, I really do feel like one thing as well. Again, we're talking about, like, say, interesting characterizations. And again, probably why this film might not have taken off. Where, and I guess, again, you wouldn't know until after the fact, so it's by the by. But the way Vic Spanner's mum, stops the strike. And again, she was a middle-aged woman, and stuff like that. And again, I think it's this thing where, again, is what it is, carry on film. But again, these, like, interesting characterizations comes at you from a different angle. It's sort of, it's almost like a Tarantino movie or something. The way, it's, I'm being a bit silly saying that, but just to, but it doesn't play how you would think. Like, this film, it is like, and again, probably where, obviously there's no designated time frame or anything like that. It doesn't play in that regard like a Tarantino movie. And obviously Tarantino is the first thing to pop to my head. Not many people have mentioned Tarantino and Carry On in the same breath, I would imagine. But yeah, it doesn't. This film does not particularly end how you would think. And I do think that is really, again, I do think that is it. And again, like this scene here, like where I feel like that, obviously, it was sanitized, but you wanted to show, like, something sexy. And I think years ago in a Carry On film, it would just be literally any, like any excuse, whether it sort of, was realistic or not. But like there, just couple in a hotel room, like in the game on but it plays real. And like again, but like I said, I think she looks so amazing in that scene. She was a sexy chick. But then again, probably might be reading more into it than it is. But like that, he's got no top on as well. And, again, I feel like it, is any topless men in another Carry On film? I doubt it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. So again, I feel like it sort of plays equal. And again, it's a thing of, it's kind of amazing, really. It's kind of embarrassing, really, that, like, they actually, it's one of the few Carry On films where, for the most part, again, there's little elements here and there where you're like, it's like, kind of, oh, that's a shame. But, it's like, something's come up. It's on about his cock. But that's such a stupid joke as well. I mean, how many films like that in James Bond and so many different things where they're like, oh, something's come up, or oh, like, and it's like, geez, like, nuts. No pun intended. Oh, we'll see if she gets it. I see what they did there. But yeah, that, like, again, though, but like, I kind of love how, like, that, like, again, this film, like, say, it's like, and like, say, something like, again, oh, sure, it's a western, but like, say, some like, things in these films, like, say, it sort of ping pongs back and forth between, like, that, like, say, like, he got married, and then, like, sort of, the strike's going on still, and it's not something that you would associate with comedy, especially comedy then and British comedy, and it's just not an honest day's work. But again, what's funny about that though? It's like he's got a baseball bat. Again, something simple as that. I mean, that's pretty sinister for a light-hearted comedy. But the fact that how many British comedy films have got a baseball bat in them? That again, probably unique. This is a brilliant scene. But again, I feel like they're there, like the women, and these guys are like, oh my god, the women are here. Oh. Do you ever find? Some you pay good money for, never been spanked by a middle-aged woman. It's not my joke. That's one thing about him. But yeah, I do think that, this film is just so good, so layered. And again, I don't know if this film plays to somebody who isn't from this generation, because, I can take a lot of this stuff as read, in the sense that I don't mean communism read, in the sense that, take it as just this is what it was like then, and so it's that kind of, that kind of thing of, and this is how I picture things from when I was a kid, and I've said a million times during this commentary, that's such a bad scene, so it is one of these things though where, so to me it's not that much of a surprise, but I feel like it's a shame that, you probably won't get very many comedies like this anymore, because, it's got to be, it's a shame, because I feel like this comedy did have something to say, especially for that time period, but, I guess Ali G the movie was kind of a bit similar. It kind of dealt with politics and was a bit like that kind of. There was a bit more going on there. So yeah, I guess there is comedies that have got that seriousness, or some of the Judd Apatow stuff. I guess has got that element to it. So yeah, maybe sort of oh no, it's done all. But this is one of those things as well. And I hate myself for saying it, because even I kind of can remember it a little bit. But when something from my generation that you always used to get people saying, oh, when I was young, you could just walk up to a factory and get a job. And they'd be like, yeah. But even I think, though, say some of the jobs I've had, I've had dead menial jobs, like cleaning jobs or warehouse jobs. And when I think not so much now, because I've applied for cleaning jobs and rubbish jobs where they're like, no thanks, and then it's just one of these things though where it's kind of you kind of think it is one of these things that years ago you could just walk into a factory job. There's a Volvo P1 800 DC car. No, I've never noticed that before. Fourth for sexy woman. I did that look again. That's funny. I don't know. Justice for all. That's what I'm talking about, isn't it? That's one funny thing as well, talking about old-fashioned sort of sayings, but I think from the generation just before me, instead of saying job centre, they say employment exchange, and the few people have ever said employment exchange to my face, it was employment exchange? Oh yeah, job centre. Look at that man. A man smoking a pipe in a cardigan. It's just a different time, right? Even that's a great. Even that August 1971 was the. That tax day. Oh yeah, I guess that's when the tax dish went out. So yeah, because it could have plays into the. Oh my god, that's crazy. I mean, what is bad though? Because say it seems like that though that and again, a little bit of an extension to that scene that I was saying that is unique and carry on, that kind of things that it's that you should think that you really want it, but then again, no, she would have been upset, and oh no. But again, it's it's how many things in Carry On films where oh my god. Boom! But then again, that's what I'm saying about this film, that even though I've seen it a million times, that I kind of forgot though that you think, oh, she would have been heartbroken if they had gone together and that. And then it's she's and it's kind of again she was the victor in that scene, and it's how many times can you say that about a Carry On film where you have had those scenes in this where it is slapping women on the backside and it's you think, oh god, but then it's no, it's still it works. and then boom, it's under protest. Brilliant. And that's the thing though as well about Sid James. I do love that, like, because I think Sid James is brilliant, but always makes me laugh when people go like, oh, you know, you get these people proper stuck in the ways, but risk from the fish when you get people going, oh, these British comedians not like those bloody foreigners. Sid James, South African. That's like brilliant. And that's what I said before. This film, not this film generally, but I love films that like, or love concepts that like mess with people's minds, but I kind of love the thought that something so British like the Carry On films, something so British like Set in a Toilet Factory. It's one of the main stars, the main star on the poster, Sid James, South African, brilliant. Oh, I'm making her a director. No, he's a worker. It's funny as well because I always say this on a lot of commentaries as well though, but when you get quiet, because I went for a pee just before I started and I want to pee now and it's not helping that there's toilets everywhere in this film. Oh my god, here we go. But even this is so brilliant though, because it's almost like the kind of, you know, the twist ending. It's like, there's going to be a strike. It's like, no, go get some pound notes. I miss pound notes. Carry on working. I think that was going to be the tell. Would have been a good tell too. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope that's made people really appreciate. Made people realise they really do like Karen at your convenience. And see you next time. Oh, the toilet's closing. But that's that motion animation. The end.